Dates back a few years. Dates back to 421 of the Common Era. It was a poem written by Tao Yuanming, a Chinese poet. It's called Peach Blossom Spring. It's an adaptation of that poem. Cheng was a fisherman. His daddy had been a fisherman. His daddy's daddy had been a fisherman. All that Cheng ever knew of his life was fishing. He'd get up early in the morning, go out, get in his boat, start fishing, fish until early afternoon, return home, only to get up and do it again the next day. Now, Cheng was happy with his life. He wasn't discontent, but he also was getting a little bit, bored with his life, I guess you might say. So one day he went down to his boat, started off, and started thinking about all of the changes that were happening in China and everything that he had seen change over the years, and the stories that his daddy had told of the changes that had happened, and the stories that his granddaddy had told of the changes that had happened. And he just kind of lost his thoughts as he was going upstream, just thinking about no matter how much things change, some things stay the same. And so Cheng was lost in his thoughts, and then all of a sudden, he smelled something, and it was something different. It didn't smell like the stream and like he had always known. And he looked up, and up ahead, he saw the most beautiful orchard of peaches and peach blossom trees. And as he's looking, those peach blossoms, they would just kind of drift down to the ground, and he kind of slowed down and looked around, and in every direction that he looked were just more and more peach blossoms. And the ground were just littered with the petals from the blossoms, and the air was filled with the fragrance of the peach trees. And Cheng was just amazed, and he decided that he needed to keep going and find out just how long or how far this orchard would continue. And so he continued on upstream until he came to the end of the orchard, and there at the end of the orchard was a mountain. And he looked up, and there was a waterfall. There was the spring, the source of the stream that he had been traveling down. And he looked at, and he too liked waterfalls. And so he looked at it with amazement. And there in the center, it looked like the waterfall split. And as he's looking through there, it looks like there's daylight on the other side. He said, well, how can this be? He said, well, I've come too far. I've got to go on and find out what is on the other side of that waterfall. So he pulled his boat up on shore and started walking up toward that waterfall and kind of went around it. And sure enough, he could see that there was an opening. It was a cave. And he looked, and he thought it might be a tight fit. But he's like, I've got to go. There's light on the other side. I've got to go and find out what this is all about. I've come too far. And so he did. So he kind of squeezed through and made it through and came out to the other side. And it opened up onto this beautiful plain. And he was just amazed at the valley and this plain that had opened up onto it. And as he stood there looking out, he heard the cock or the crow of the cocks off in the distance and the dogs barking. And he looked, and there were well-built homes there in luscious fields and in pleasant ponds. And he looked around, and he saw men and women that were going about their daily work. And they were wearing clothes, ordinary clothes, much like what he was wearing. And he looked over, and he saw the gray hairs there playing, and the children playing, and everybody seemed content and happy. And Cheng was just amazed. He just stood there taking it all in, and there were paths that crisscrossed throughout the land. It wasn't too long before the villagers, they realized that they had a visitor. And at first they were a little bit shocked, but then they realized that they really needed to go and talk to this visitor, find out where this visitor had come from. So they went up and they started talking to Cheng and began asking him questions, and he shared everything that had been going on and told them how he had come to their village. They invited him to the chief's, or the main villager's home for a nice dinner. So he went to that home, and they had good wine, and they prepared fresh chicken. Now Cheng hadn't had chicken in so long. He had a diet of fish, and all that chicken was so succulent, so wonderful, and fresh vegetables, and he felt like he was being served like he was a king. And all the villagers, they would gather around, and they wanted to hear the stories of everything that had happened. And Cheng wanted to hear their story as well. So we found out that they had escaped back in the Six Dynasty when they had started to persecute Confucian scholars and other intellectuals. And these people, about 500 years ago, had escaped to this village. And Cheng, they were curious as to what had happened in the time that they had been gone. And so Cheng relayed, different dynasties and what had happened, the wars and the persecutions, and they sat there and they were horrified that no matter how much things change, things stay the same. Cheng told them about the building of the Great Wall, and they were amazed at that. And Cheng said, well, you should come see it. No, we're quite content right where we're at. Well, it wasn't too much longer before Cheng got invited to other homes as well. And so he did, and every time he went, they served good wine and a food that was just, so delicious. Cheng was there for several days and realizing that he probably needed to be heading back home. And so as he was preparing to go, the villagers, they pleaded with him, please, do not share of our existence. We have survived this many years, and we're happy. Do not share that you have been here. And so Cheng left, and he squeezed back out through that cave, came out to the waterfall, and there was his boat right where he had left it. So he came down, got back in his boat, and he started heading back downstream. But he was intentionally marking the way as he went, just in case he should want to come back. He got back to his home and went to the city and began to tell the magistrate about what he had found. The magistrate immediately sent his best men, his wisest counselors, to go with Cheng to find this hidden village. So they started going back upstream, but Cheng, everywhere he looked, he could not find even one of the markings that he had left. He continued upstream, never found the peach blossoms. Cheng became disoriented, and they soon called off the hunt and returned home. Wasn't too many years later when a recluse, but a scholar, had heard of Cheng's adventures, and he decided that he too must go and find the hidden village. But the scholar took ill before he had even left on the adventure and died. And so, my friends, Peach Blossom Spring has remained hidden just as the villagers desired.